Good morning. Thank you, everybody. Welcome, everybody, to our presentation. In advance, thank you very much for attending this talk. My partner, Professor Liliana, and me, Luis Villegas, are hoping to bring you a very interesting and useful presentation for your teaching career.
Thank you very much, everybody, for being here, and thank you for giving us the opportunity to share this experience with you. Our study is called Fostering Oral Skills in English in Students with Autism Spectrum Disorder and Down Syndrome through the implementation of Augmentative and Alternative Communication Systems, AAC. Before we start, we actually want to tell you what the agenda is for today. So first of all, we're going to start with a brief introduction of the study. Then we're going to summarize the most important aspects of our literature review. Then we're going to describe the study. Afterwards, we're going to talk about some preliminary findings that we have so far. And finally, some conclusions and pedagogical implications of the study at the moment. Okay, so let's begin. As I said to you, this is the agenda for today. We're going to give you a brief introduction of the study. Then we're going to summarize the most important aspects of our literature review. Afterwards, we're going to describe the study. Then we're going to talk about some preliminary findings that we have so far. And finally, we're going to discuss some conclusions and pedagogical implications with you. Let's begin with the introduction. So this study emerged from the experiences gathered in a research group on diverse educational needs in the teaching of English called CINEDEI. This research group is formed by students and professors from the Department of Foreign Languages at Universidad de Caldas. We have had the privilege to be working with students with autism spectrum disorder and Down syndrome from a project that is called English School for Students with Special Educational Needs, ENED, which is again a project from the Department of Foreign Languages at Universidad de Caldas. Our objective with the study is to implement augmentative and alternative communication systems to foster oral skills in students with autism spectrum disorder and Down syndrome. Now, in terms of our literature review, we thought to give you a very brief review of the special educational needs laws and regulations in Colombia, and also an overview of those two conditions, autism spectrum disorder and Down syndrome. And finally, we want to give you some ideas about what augmentative and alternative communication systems are, because they are the strategies that we are working on the most in our study. So talking about SEN regulations and laws in Colombia, we can say that over the last few decades, we have actually made some progress in terms of regulations, in terms of the protection of people with disabilities. As you can see here, there are quite a few regulations that have been created from 2003 onwards. But I just want to catch your attention on the last one, which is Decreto 1421 from 2017, which is perhaps the most important one and the most recent one, in which they talk about inclusion, and they talk about the root and conditions for the educational service of disabled people. Let me just go back, excuse me. I just want to finish saying that although we believe that we have made some progress because there are some regulations and laws, we believe that there is still a lot of work to do in terms of budgeting, in terms of resources in schools, and in terms of training or opportunities for training for teachers. Therefore, I think it's our responsibility actually to create strategies to work with students with special educational needs and to make inclusion something real in our classrooms. Now, the two conditions that we want to talk about are autism spectrum disorder and Down syndrome. So let's begin with ASD. ASD is a neurological and relational disorder. The characteristics are, first of all, restricted and repetitive behavior, and secondly, deficits in social interaction and communication. Those are the biggest characteristics of students with ASD. However, they also present some problems in other areas. For example, number one, executive functions, which are the functions that we need on a daily basis to operate. And these are the skills that we need on academic environments as well. So we're talking about skills like organizing, prioritizing, ordering things, etc. So it's complicated for a person with ASD to actually get organized. The second problem is theory of mind. This refers to the perception of others and the perceptions other people have about us. It is also very complicated for a person with ASD to understand visual cues and gestures that perhaps for normotypical people are very easy to understand. Another problem is that students with ASD have weak central coherence. That means that they are not able to get the whole picture. They are actually very good at getting details, but not the whole. And finally, they have problems with sensory processing. As you can see there in the slide, sensory processing refers to the way the nervous system receives messages from the senses and turns them into responses. The majority of times, what a person with ASD receives is not exactly what a person can actually respond to. So most of the times their responses are inadequate. And finally, students who are in the autism spectrum are predominantly visual learners, according to Leibarger and Monsoon, 2017. This final characteristic is very important for us because actually we want to take advantage of this for our study, and that's why we have been implementing this kind of strategies. But I'm going to tell you more about it in a moment. Now, Down syndrome. Down syndrome is also called DS or T21. The first person to talk about the syndrome was John Landon Down, therefore, hence the name, in 1866. It is a genetic condition which occurs when an individual has a full or partial extra copy of chromosome 21 present in all or some of their cells. This definition came from National Down Syndrome Society. As you can see in all the bullet points, they have different characteristics as well. They have characteristics that impede certain areas, but I'm just going to refer specifically to the last two. One is problems with language development, and the other is the fact that they are mainly visual learners, according to Rees 2009. Therefore, they share that last characteristic with students with autism spectrum disorder. Actually, I would say that they share most of these. Now, we decided to use augmentative and alternative communication systems as a strategy to deal with vocabulary retention and oral production because we believe it's a great tool. It's a great strategy because these actually are a set of tools and strategies that people have used to solve everyday communicative challenges, especially people who have severe problems with communication or people with no communication at all. Effective communication occurs when the intent and meaning of one individual is understood by another person. That's the main goal, to be understood by another person. The form is less important than the actual understanding of the message because it doesn't matter actually the way in which they communicate, but the idea is that at the end they communicate successfully. They can convey the message successfully. And we have actually discovered that it can be done through AAC systems. All of this information was taken from the International Society for Augmentative and Alternative Communication, ISAC. So I'm going to give you an example of what these strategies or tools are. AAC covers a huge range of techniques which support or replace spoken communication. In our case, with most of our students, what the AAC is doing is actually supporting the language. But we have some cases in which it replaces the language because they are nonverbal, but that's a different matter. So this AAC covers the followings, for example, gestures, signing, symbols like pictograms or word boards or communication boards. We have pictures, photos, etc. Okay, so there is a huge range, but so far we have been working with pictures and pictograms. And I'm going to tell you more about that after Professor Luis' presentation. But I just want to say that I don't know if you have noticed that from the very beginning, we have been using pictograms with you. We presented a visual agenda, we presented first the agenda with words and then the visual agenda for you to see, and every single slide has a pictogram. That's how we work with our students. Okay, all this information was taken from Royal College of Speech and Language Therapists 2020. Now, we came up with the following research question after doing a diagnostic stage. To what extent can oral skills in English be fostered in students with ASD and DS through the implementation of augmentative and alternative communication systems? This is what we really want to respond at the end of the study. Now, the investigation. So we're going to tell you about the context, the participants, the methodology, and the approach. The context. So we have been very privileged, as I said to you at the very beginning, to have been working with students with autism spectrum disorder and Down syndrome. They are participating in a project called ANED, English School for Students with Special Educational Needs, from Caldas University. What we are doing is having online English classes through a virtual platform twice a week. And we have been very lucky, really, because we have counted with their engagement and with the family supports, because without them, actually, it would have been impossible to have the classes in this virtual environment. Okay, in that project, there are more than 30 students, but we decided to work with a focused group. So we're working with a mixed class with 11 students who have autism spectrum disorder. 6 of them have Down syndrome, and there is 1 student who has both conditions, ASD and DS. Their ages vary from 7 to 28 years old, and they come from different or from various economical strata.
Right now, we are going to tell you and describe how we actually conducted this study and how we came up with the results, findings, and conclusions of the study. Great. Okay. From the beginning, we wanted first to have the ability to quantify performance patterns and the type of oral responses from the students in a mixed study that could give us the opportunity to use both quantitative and qualitative data analysis procedures. So we came up with this mixed approach because we wanted to be able to describe those type of behavior and participation pattern, and especially the oral output that the students from this population could. Okay, so also we kept in mind one of the advantages of this mixed approach because they complement each other. Among the many advantages that this mixed approach combining quantitative and qualitative approaches have. Please, next. Good. So the stages of our study are these. First, in the diagnostic stage, we started working with a group of 28 students with autism and Down syndrome. We have in mind the objective of teaching a foreign language, which is teaching the language for communication. So if we teach a language, we should be directed into helping students use the language in real situations. This is why we came up with the initial research question of this study. To what extent can the implementation of AACs promote some oral skills in students with ASD and BS? Good. So after the implementation of the strategy, we started conducting our study. We selected some instruments that helped us gather most of the information that was analyzed, and then from the triangulation, we came up with the findings and the pedagogical implications and conclusions of the study, and we also answer our research questions. The last section of this presentation will be showing you and describing the findings and the conclusions. So let's talk about specifically and in a detailed way the methods that we use, the instruments that we use for the collection of the data that was later analyzed. First, we have a teacher's diary that at the same time worked as a researcher's diary. What we registered and recorded on the teacher's diary or researcher's diary was the observation of the patterns of performance of the students, having in mind oral production. So the observations that we administered were focused or structured observations because we had an a priori objective in mind, which was documenting and registering and recording specifically the performance from the students and the type of output. At the initial stage of the study, we wanted to know the previous experience and the previous knowledge that these participants had toward English topic or as a language per se. We wanted to know if the students had the opportunity to participate in language classes like at school or if in any form at home. Some aspects of the foreign language was promoted in their homes. Okay, please, let's move on to the next. And in another detailed description, this is what the methodology of the study consisted of. Remember, we administered for parents a questionnaire in which they let us know the experience of their children regarding a foreign language, in this case, English. We also asked their parents what they thought the impact of their lives, would be from studying English. We collected a very important amount of information that is also part of the analysis and that will be presented at the end of the talk. And when we administer the observation techniques, we evaluated specifically the performance patterns and also the oral production of the student. Something that I need to say about the observation checklist is that we didn't implement them as a class. We didn't observe the whole group as a class, but we observed individually 18 participants from selected a focus group. And the observation checklist was administered individually. Right? So that would give us more straightforward and complete analysis of the information. Also, like I said before, the structural observations that were recorded in the researcher's diary, we call them structures because we had a purpose in mind at the moment of making the observations, which was focusing our attention on the output, specifically on the output, on the type of answers that they could provide to the teacher, on the type of oral communication that they could produce, and on the type of associations of messages, words, and ideas in relation to the pictograms and the AACs that we implemented. Next is going to be a description of what AAC is.
So I already told you what AAC systems are, but I would like to tell you more about how we implemented them in our classes. So we have done 2 phases so far because our idea is to do a few of them. Remember that this is just a preliminary, some preliminary findings of our study. So in the initial phase, we used picture-to-picture association. Very important to actually talk about something that is very important for students with ASD especially, and it is the fact that when you are presenting new vocabulary or new lexical units, you need to start with something real or close to real, or as close to real as possible, or concrete. So that's why we started with a picture, then picture and word association. On the second phase, we introduced the pictograms. So we did picture and pictogram association, then pictogram and word association, and finally, at the moment, we're working with pictogram and short sentence association. Why pictograms then as a second phase? Because basically what pictograms have is the opportunity or the possibility to work on longer lexical units. With a pictogram, okay, with a picture, perhaps you can, or a student can say words or ideas, okay, or some of them can perhaps create some sentences, whereas whereas the pictogram gives the students the possibility of use each pictogram for each lexical unit that they want to actually express. So you can find verbs, pronouns, nouns, adjectives, basically anything you need, you can find in pictograms. Pictograms are universal. You can actually find them in the web for free because they are, the idea is to share them with everybody who needs them. I'm going to give you an example of the kind of work that we do in our classes. For example, here you can see the association of a picture with the word. So here the student is presented with a picture, and then they have to say if it's number 1 or number 2. So they are associating the picture with the word. Once they associate it, they can say the number, for example, at an initial stage, and then they can repeat the word. We can also give them a picture and then pictograms, for example, in this case, 3 of them. So the student has to identify what the pictogram for the picture is. And then they have to say the word. Another one that we have done is, for example, this when we were working on professions and occupations. So I gave them this clue, who am I? So the idea, again, you have the pictogram here that refers to the question. Then we gave them the first pictogram. So according to this pictogram, they had to guess the profession or the job. If they didn't understand with the first pictogram, we would give them a second one. And then hopefully they would give us the word, the profession. Another exercise that we have done, which requires a bit longer thought process, let's say, is this one. Because, okay, excuse me, can you help me? Because you're working with a situation. So here you have the pictogram for the question, and then you give them another pictogram for the situation. I need to study. Where can I go? So immediately they have to analyze the pictogram. Okay, the question first, the pictogram, then the situation to say to the library or to the classroom. Okay, and we have also done a association of pictogram with longer sentences. Okay, Professor Luis.
Okay, thank you. So once again, remember that we relied on their parents during the classes. Some students were assisted by their parents, but we also relied on their parents for some theoretical foundations for this study. And also, when we were reviewing the literature for this study, we understood that students with ASD and DS, they pay attention to the details and their memory is very strong. So, and based on that analysis and those studies that we did in the this intervention, we knew from the beginning that routines play an essential role in the development of students with PhD. So what we did was to take into account those features, and we took advantage of them. We took advantage of their ability to memorize, their ability to memorize details as well, and also their ability to associate routines, right? Okay, so routines we now play an essential role in the development of people with ASD and DS. So what we did was to incorporate those routines into our language lessons. And the results of the activities were successful in terms of the performance of the students. They can associate images, let's say pictograms, ACs to colors, and in the second phase of the study, they could also produce more complex pieces or chunks like expressing likes or dislikes. Visual aids facilitate vocabulary retention, which is the case of this population with these two conditions. Other activities that we found were very successful in the teaching of a foreign language was those activities in which the pictograms, the AAC material, was highly related to their daily lives of the students. We kept in mind, like I said before, that the objective of a language is to teach it for communicative purposes, and also that class material should reflect real life. In other words, me as a teacher, I must make sure that what I teach in class is going to be useful for the students. I have to teach them what they can do in real life with what I'm teaching. Just go back one more slide, please, Professor. Okay.
Excuse
Yes,
me.
no problem. That's okay. Um, so if we know from the beginning that students with ASD and DS can be educated, we have to keep in mind also that they need special procedures and special attention. Okay? At some times, we also need to educate their parents, right? We also need to educate ourselves as society and also as an academic community, because we sometimes put the limits on them. They are not limited at all. During the lessons, we also found that these students were able to develop some creativity, and they were also able to develop other skills, especially because we were working with pictograms. International standardized exams like GRE and TOEFL, they describe interpretation of diagrams as reading. So when you take one of these international exams, in the section of reading is where you actually have to make interpretations of diagrams. That is considered also as reading comprehension. Your ability to make interpretations, to make deductions from diagrams is also considered reading. So we were able to develop other skills, especially because we also had participants who were illiterate in their native language, but they could participate spontaneously in the English lessons that we taught them. Okay, some other findings and unexpected results that we got from this investigation. Uh, During the activities, students used code switching either consciously or unconsciously. What let us know that students are really incorporating the native language or the target language into their speech. What comes along with code switch is also the spontaneous use of the target language. Spontaneous participation in the classes using the target language is also giving us a result, an important finding, in which we could understand that even if students are very good at memorizing details and orders, with the spontaneous use of the language, they are demonstrating that they are not just simply memorizing. Okay, okay, please. With any scenario, any teaching scenario, you can try the following sentence or expression that we know in English, thinking out of the box. Out of the box, you know, it means not to be so square, not to be so politically correct. How does it apply to our context, to our scenarios of teaching? Thinking out of the box basically means that when you're teaching, you must never be afraid of trying new things that you have never tried before in your classes, even if it means sometimes to move the lesson out of the class. But of course, paying extra attention and being very careful, because as we know, routines, especially to students with ASD, are essential. And if you change the routine drastically, then you may face some difficulties with this. Okay. Now, in the discussion section of this talk, we would like to highlight the pedagogical and also social implications of this study. Of course, the main strategy for promoting oral skills was the use of pictograms to help students make associations to complete ideas. Those materials are successful as long as they are related to the students' daily lives, to the students' reality. Pictograms, any type of material that we use in our language classes should reflect what real life is. How am I going to use this in real life? In order to make a learning significant process, students need to see the connection between what they learn in the classroom and what they need to do with the new learning. Okay. We also talk about spontaneous participation in the classroom, as long as the activities involve the students in any way, especially when they have to develop some creativity. The students need to be given the opportunity to use the material that we use in class. They also need to be given sometimes the opportunity to play the role of the this is another way to demonstrate how they acquire the new knowledge. Like I said before, in the findings, ASD and DS, students with these two conditions are able to participate in any kind of learning, especially foreign languages. Just keep in mind that they need special procedures and special things. We need to keep on discovering those strategies that will help us promote those oral communication skills in this population. Once more, remember, ASD, yes, the students, learners, will be educated, but we also need to educate their parents, and we need to educate ourselves as an academic community and as society. At the beginning of this intervention, Professor Liliana told you that we lack budget, we lack training of teachers, but we can change our minds about this population. Remember, mm, they have a strong memory. They possess other skills, even if they do not develop completely social skills. We have to understand that social skills for them are difficult. They perceive social relations in a different way, but it doesn't mean that they don't have other skills. They do have good skills. And what we have noticed in the classes with them teaching them a foreign language is that they develop creativity, as I said before. They also develop other skills. One of our students, he is not able to speak, but he writes in English. So in every class, he uses a board on which he writes the answers and he participates. And like I said before, the ability to recognize and to make interpretations for diagrams is also considered reading comprehension. We need to get involved in more studies like this, especially in our context, universities majors that train students to become linguists, as in the program of modern languages specifically, they have expressed that um, they don't feel completely trained in facing the situation, in facing one student with a diverse educational need in their classroom. So we need also to train our graduates in strategies for teaching people with this condition, especially today when the heyday of education revolves around the new term that is called inclusion. In the last years, and we will basically mean giving the opportunity to people to participate in social processes like education. Also, the World Health Organization recognizes these two conditions as conditions, not as diseases. We educators have to keep in mind that sciences and disciplines like education and pedagogy, they evolve. They become better every day as more research is carried out. So just to give you a quick and silly example, nowadays medical practitioners are talking about not coronavirus. Coronavirus is just the living organism that transmits the disease. So this is why they say COVID-19. Okay, they don't talk about coronavirus. Another silly and quick example is also medical practitioners talk about Persian fever instead of saying malaria. You know, terms and vocabulary become obsolete. What can we say in our field of knowledge, education? Uh, let's not refer to people with conditions because that is an adjective. I mean, we should refer to every individual as learner or student. We talk about our people in the classroom as students, right? Or learners. So instead, we can say a person with autism is the right term. Another thing that we would like to highlight from this presentation is the use of the expression special education. So in the slide, you can see that the word special is covered. Uh, and this adjective may have some different connotations, right? Sometimes negative connotations. Let's start talking about special education and let's keep on saying diverse educational needs. Is there right? And thank you for your time in participating in this presentation. At the end of the talk, when we show you and we share some material with you, Professor Liliana and I will give you our emails. Every question, every comment, anything that you want to say about this study is to be welcome. And also, if you want to participate in any form with this study, is open to participation from you. And thank you very much.
And we want to show you some photos of our students doing different activities. So, for example, the three students or the production of the three students on the left, they are students with autism, and the other two are students with Down syndrome. And on the next one, you can see we were doing a class about jobs and occupations as well, so they got disguised with a specific profession. Okay, so as Professor Luis said, thank you very much for your attention, and we are very open to your suggestions and your comments. So here are our emails. So thank you very much.
Thank you.